Right. Hello. I think we are live. Um, Thank you, everyone, for joining or finding this on YouTube. Months down. My name is Joe Kappas. I'm a designer at Cooper, and I have with me today Hannah, two amazing designers from the Pittsburgh area. And I think I'm just going to give a quick introduction to Mark and Hannah and then let them take it away with some of their own more personal introductions. So both Mark and Hannah are distinguished designers. They are both founding faculty members of the Masters in Design program at the Masters in Design for Social Innovation, I should say, at the School of Visual Design in New York, and distinguished adjunct professor in Pittsburgh. And they are both currently the principal designers at Fit Associates in Pittsburgh as well. So would you like to give a little introductions to each one of you?
Sure. Hello, everybody. And hello, Joe. Well, I guess I would just add, I'm somewhere on the border between seasoned and salty, I guess. I've been doing this for 35 years, and most of that has been project work, but I've been teaching a lot. But 7 years ago, I realized that what I had been seeing as tech and design work all along really was social. I mean, it was the teams and the groups and the organizations that mattered as much as anybody's skill or knowledge. So I set out to learn how groups of people create better outcomes together, and that's what I am doing now through FIT and through teaching at those two schools.
That's great.
I started my career in fine arts, but I grew up in South Africa, so I was looking for something that has a little bit more impact than art. So I chose design, interior design as a career, and I had that for 15 years. But then I was looking for ways organizations be more impactful in the world, in the sense of I think organizations bring so much potential to create great stuff in the world, and that's brought me to the US and to Fit Associates.
Yeah.
Great. Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Should we say something about Fit? Maybe we should say something about the work we're doing at the company. Fit's been around since 2005. And for the first 7 years or so, it was research and reframing in service to design and decision-making, mostly in big product companies, so automotive, home health, communications, those kind of things. But along the way, kind of like my own experience, we kept bumping into these organizational issues, and those were the things that were keeping the great stuff from shipping. They'd have a good process, they do good research, they have great people, but they also had a culture that was clinging so tightly to the story of here's who we are and here's what we make, that nothing new could get out the door. So together, around the time I met Hannah, we were both taking the time to learn about teams and groups and organizations. For one thing, helping them really listen, so that they're changed by what they see when they get out into the world. And so there's a chance for them to create something different from that new understanding. And that's the work we're trying to do.
Mm-hmm. So have you felt that you are really seeing different outcomes from approaching design work and with this new philosophy?
I would say yes, and also it's early for us to have whole, long egg to chicken stories. But we're engaging with different questions, so there are going to be different outcomes. We're engaging more with organizational or community questions than with product or business questions.
Right. So officially, our purpose here today is to elaborate a little bit on some of the writing that you two have done for the Cooper Journal, and the piece Reflection, the Pause That Gives Insight that you wrote specifically, two-part piece. So I want to get into that a little bit right away, I think. So you say in the piece, right, that reflective pauses are a really good way to navigate the synthesis process. And by synthesis, I think we mean the moment sort of when you come back from doing research in particular, in our case, and you have all these notes and you have all these ideas floating around in your head, and you need to understand how to make sense of that information or make meaning out of that information. And so you say in the piece, right, there's a couple of things that are frequent problems that get in the way: diagram hypnosis and analysis paralysis. And so I was kind of hoping you could talk a little bit about what you mean by diagram hypnosis and analysis paralysis, and then how the reflective pause can help in those situations.
Okay. Maybe I'll try. The article has descriptions, and maybe I'll try to come at it through stories.
Great.
You know, quite a while ago, let's talk about diagram hypnosis. Quite a while ago, I did a project that had to do with military recruiting. They said, well, we know a lot about soldiers, but we don't know very much about high school kids and their moms trying to make the decision about whether, what to do next. And so we did all of the research. We did interviews. We went into homes. We went to military installations. We did all kinds of things. And that all cooked down through synthesis to 4 persona, which was basically a way of saying there's 4 reasons people join the military. And those were useful, but my regret about that was that I think the advertising agency and the unit of the military substituted those 4 ideas, those 4 diagrams, with actually meeting those people and understanding their stories, and that sort of those 4 things became the new truth. And they were hypnotizing. They're so comfortable to have a simple answer, and so you just work with that. And
right.
And so there was some new understanding, but I'm not sure there was any new connection to the lives of these people, which was really the original goal of the work. So you get hypnotized by this wonderful model you've made. You fall in love with it, And analysis paralysis, I think, for me, a story about that was a project that had to do with why people save for retirement and how they save for retirement. Again, lots of interviews, lots of visits, lots of the stuff we do. And we transcribed all those interviews and we turned them into sticky notes. And I don't know, there were surely over 1,000. They covered the walls of the conference room. They spilled out into the hallway on foam core. And so there were 3 people that worked for a couple of weeks, and there were lines, there were strings of yarn, there were cloud shapes, there was all these things about this model that more than filled a room, trying to get it right, trying to cover every aspect of what we'd heard. And the result was, well, A, 3 people that could tell you anything about the data, B, a room-sized model that no one could read, they needed a guided tour, and C, a team and a client that really had no tool to help them with the next step, right? We were paralyzed from moving forward by our desire, what we had heard. So that's analysis paralysis.
Those are fantastic examples.
And what was the last part of that question?
Right, so the last part, I guess, really, I just want to get at the heart of your post and ask, so how is it that the reflective pause enters those situations and can help?
Yeah, I think what we've been learning is that if you look at a human being, we know the world in many ways. We know it through what we read, but we also know it through what we sense in our body, in our emotions, and our intuition. And often when we get to work, we kind of check out our humanity in the door and we bring our brains and we think a lot about what's happening. But as we started doing our work where we moved from strategic questions about what should we make and what should we do, more to deeper questions like who are we becoming as an organization, we started looking for deeper methods, deeper questions, deeper methods. And one of our guinea pig clients were people who were saying, help us, our clients don't like what we make. But what we realized in the process is there was no relationship between them and the client that they were serving. So we brought the two of them together, and instead of analysis, we really had conversations where the two of them engaged in a series of conversations of really getting to know each other. And then at the kind of the now, so what moment, we could have gone like, okay, so what should we do? But instead, we've learned from from a group called Rios Partners, who work in more social related questions. And something that we saw them do is give some time for people to just be quiet, and then use models as a way to express a deeper question, like what is possible.
Physical models.
Physical models, yeah. Build physical models in silence, with saying like, what do we feel is possible here? And ever since that day, really good things came out. For instance, in that moment, times where, okay, a realization of, when we as a department can't stay order takers, we need to step up. We're invited to step up as partners. Ever since then, we've been using the model of let's really be in the data or be with each other, and then let's take a break and really listen for what's true, and then work from that. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, my follow-up question is, why do you think it works so well, or why have you been seeing success from it?
I'll try that one. It's often Hannah that facilitates these things. Both of us do, but we refer to neuroscientists. The neuroscientists can tell you why this works. There's a side of human cognition that is busy paying attention all the time. It's good at noticing patterns. It notices subtle things like emotional cues, it's always trying to put things together. Mm-hmm. But it doesn't work in tidy diagrams, and it's not verbal. It doesn't express itself through language. So you can Google creative pause and get a lot of hits, and you can read books like one is The Open Focused Brain. There's Jill Bolte Taylor's TED Talk, My Stroke of Insight. But this pause that we're talking about creates an opportunity for that nonverbal, pattern noticing, leap making side of ourselves to show up and get noticed and maybe express itself. And so another example uses, well, why do so many of us have stories about a sudden realization when we're in the shower? Mm-hmm. So you're in a different environment. It's not the usual scenery. Nobody's going to interrupt you. You feel like safe from that. Your busy mind has stuff to do. Like its senses are flooded. There's white noise. There's all this sensation. You got to remember whether you wash your hair or not. You're keeping your hands busy. And then suddenly, like, bang, that's why my car won't start, or that's how gravity works, or whatever. So people have been taking advantage of creative pause for millennia, mm-hmm. and it's not really a new thing. And so why does it work? We understand more in the last couple of decades from people studying this, but also we understand it because creative people and groups have been talking about it since before spaghetti. So
yeah, not only creative people, but I think also people in the spiritual world. I think those two worlds really reverence silence and space in order for a deeper wisdom to surface. Yeah,
that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, and it seems like part of the challenge here is introducing it to modern day business environments to some extent, right? So how do you do that? Like, what is the process for you of explaining this to people who wouldn't understand it easily or are skeptical of it, and especially people who live, perhaps like me and many, in a day-to-day environment that really values, efficiency and drive forward?
Yeah, I think the nice thing is we all live in that world, right? The world that's like, don't just stand there, do something. Like, we value productivity over anything else. And there's actually a book about organizational ADD. Like, we feel like we are being chased down corridors by our to-do lists, which makes it almost impossible to just have the conversations that are difficult and do the work that's outside this narrow stretch of importance. So tactily, when we start talking about, everyone's like, yeah, I know that. And I think there are two components to this question. The one is that we are individuals living in a obsessively busy culture, and then we're obsessively busy culture that demands of individuals to be busy. So we kind of, we work on both fronts. I personally care about this because there was a time in my life where I couldn't be still, you know. I was just so busy all the time, but I really wanted to be still because I needed my inner compass over my cultural script. I needed to understand things. So getting still is a skill that one can practice. And when we do client workshops, we actually introduce them to the idea of moving from your verbal mind, your busy mind, that actually activates. When you're very busy, you start feeling stressed, and that's because you're so in your story that your sympathetic nervous system is activated, and your focus narrows. So I need to do this thing. I go into hunter mode. I need to do this thing, get this thing done, and you're cut off from a lot of other information flows. And then we help people in workshops actually experientially. We first introduce it intellectually, and then experientially we walk them through exercises to actually go to the more open, spacious place inside us. Mm-hmm. And I use an exercise I've described in the blog called sense drench, which very much just says, okay, imagine that you're at your favorite place, and now you engage all your senses, and that really helps people, even to a little bit, to help them sink to a more relaxed space. And when you're more relaxed, you're more receptive to listen. So we do that individually, and then collectively we do activities. We invite people to participate in activities like, let's take a walk, or let's sit in 10 minutes, and when we come back, let's draw or write in that silent space.
I'm thinking as I'm listening to Hannah, I mean, and maybe this is partly behind your question, that when you hear us talk about this stuff, or you read those articles and you think, okay, I'm going to go to a client workshop and I'm going to say, we're going to be quiet for 10 minutes, that's a little scary. Or it feels like, how are they going to react to that? They're going to say, no, we don't want to do that. And it's been a big surprise. And like Hannah either is far more advanced a human than I am, or we just come from different directions. But like for me, the first few times it was scary, I think for both of us. Mm. And I anticipated that we would have to persuade or explain, and so we armed ourselves with things like neuroscience. But so first of all, I mean, this is not the first thing we do. Mm-hmm. And so there's all sorts there is a bunch of activity, and there's a bunch of new information, and there's a bunch of shared experience. And then we get to a place where the people are feeling kind of full. And then we say, you know what, we're going to do this thing. And maybe it's 10 minutes, like whatever it is, it's 10 minutes. It's going to be quiet in the room. Just write in your notebooks 10 minutes. Or take a walk and leave your phone here. Or you just like whatever the actual activity is. And people go, okay. And they just do that. Like, I don't know if we've ever had anybody really push back.
I think what also helps is that we feel, in the beginning, as you say, like especially if you look at a room with 25 engineers, it's not an easy ask. But as you stand in the importance of this, like, hey, I really want to help you come to a place of more openness, and I'm doing this because I really want you to access something that I know it lives inside you, but maybe you haven't heard that for a while. So standing in that, I'm acting in your best interest, I think also helps us ask things that are not the typical cultural thing.
Yeah. In fact, so now I kind of can't wait because we've seen its value so much.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm. And it's nice to start seeing it happen in workshop with clients. Like few few weeks ago we had a workshop where we introduced just reflection, and then people were working away, and someone at the table asked their colleagues, "Hey guys, don't you think we should just step away for a moment and like have 5 minutes of silence before we go on?" So you start seeing that if you've done it once, it's easier to start taking initiative in your own culture. Without us, yeah.
Yeah, this is interesting because this is one of the things that I am getting out of this conversation that I didn't get out of reading the blog pieces alone. I think is a little bit more of that understanding that context, understanding that it's actually can be a small and simple tool in a way, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It sounds, I think when we first introduce it, we put a little packaging around it, so it may seem like a bigger deal, like we're kind of explaining and introducing, but once it's happened a few times, it's just how we do things, and because people tend to embrace it.
Yeah.
And we're not, I think I'll also say, and I don't know, who's listening, and I think things like be still, be silent, I mean, that language can sound fluffy or something. It can have some baggage, but it's completely human, and I have some of those reservations, but it's, for me, the thing that's happened as we use this is I've expanded my own idea of who we are when we're doing this work. We're bigger than the what happens in our brains when we try to figure out what to write. Like we're much bigger than that.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a way to go after that, to include it. And so it feels like a good thing.
Right. I mean, one of the ways that I'm understanding it now a little bit more is all of these, especially in design, soft skills or tacit skills that we don't quite have language for, but people see, designers go off and mysteriously come back with some interesting result. Part of what I see your work as is making those things more explicit there, and giving language to them, how we talk about them. But I am curious to hear a little bit more about how the reflective pause does fit into your larger process then, or your larger design philosophy.
Well, design philosophy, I'll say the way I've come to think about this is, I came into design with people who taught that design is a process, and there's probably 1,700 different ways to draw it, but it's basically get out there and pay attention and make some sense of that and try something and find out you're wrong, and around you go, right? It's a way to learn by trying and to create through a kind of persistent evolution of understanding and form together at the same time, and through depends how you count, 50 or 70 year history of design, the depth and openness of the burial deaths has been somewhat lost in the culture of fast-paced productivity, kind of factory models of design and innovation, and so we hurry up and be creative,
Mm-hmm.
But when you think about it, the difference between meaningful, impactful work that matters, and and I don't know, makes money for your employer because it matters, and repetitive or dull or even harmful work is largely in the way we pay attention. If you just think about what we're doing when we do our work, at each stage, the depth of and the depth of the results depends on the way we listen, the way we get in conversation with the slice of life that we're trying to understand, the way we put what we've seen in conversation with our own values, with our own sense maker and pattern finder, the way we get in conversation and pay attention to materials and put that back out into the world. And it's listen and observe. I mean, listen or observe and reflect, make sense, and make around we go. And so I think our model of design, whether it's individual or organizational scale, is just an attempt to recover the depth and openness of the creative process. It's not a new model.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I want to add there that we often ask ourselves, like, what is the what's the source of ideas? And especially if we're an innovation team, like, we, in relationship to the world, are the source. And going through this process, that's the incubator for the work, for the ideas to come from. And being able to access all of our knowledge, like everything that sits in us, not just what sits in here or what the client wants from us, being able to live in a state of open curiosity and receptivity as opposed to driven deadline, I really believe makes a huge difference in the quality of the work that we deliver. So it's that as well for me. It's really important how we show up every day in every way.
Most work environments are just full of competition for the sort of viral, it's things like, you better deliver a report that the stakeholders like. Yeah. And that sort of measure, their judgment becomes your goal. Mm-hmm. As opposed to actually understanding and getting in there and serving the situation with something that matters. Yeah. And
the idea of perfection, that perfection immediately takes us out of a place of playful, open curiosity and puts us into a place of needing to perform and needing to achieve, and that just severs us from a lot of our own resources.
Mm-hmm.
Another kind of paralysis.
Mm-hmm.
Another kind of paralysis, yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I'm hearing a lot about sort of creating spaces for yourself to be in a more comfortable way within the organization. So this is going to sound a little bit similar, but tell me a little bit about bringing this whole process to an organization. So for us, I would just say that sometimes we end up doing the kind of work that you're describing, not as often as we'd like to at Cooper, but oftentimes we get hired for one design project and then discover that the real problem is organizational or interpersonal. Is the case for you as well, or do people know sort of what they're signing up for?
I think that's something we're still learning. We have gone through a transition ourselves to partly around this question. What has been happening a lot is that the phone would ring because of the work we used to do. Mm-hmm. And then we'd start asking, okay, what's under that? Like, why, or what's the bigger story, and where are you really trying to go with this? And then it doesn't take long, or sometimes we meet and have a what's going on workshop where we just draw all over the wall to try to get a picture of their view of what the hell is going on. Yeah. And it doesn't take long before you start, somebody draws the angry guy on the board, or there's a line between two departments of the company, or frowny face, something starts showing up that is their way of cluing us in that there's an elephant in the room, but they're not ready to name it. And now we're more equipped to notice that and respond. Maybe using that to reframe the request and reframe the project. So let's take care of the kind of the roots and soil of this weed that's growing up here, mm-hmm. and then maybe something really great. But we are also talking more like we're talking right now, and that is changing who calls, mm-hmm. and the conversations that we get in. And
the initiatives we take, we're starting to do more improv or more workshops directed at specific things, like an improv workshop on communication, or a workshop around community dialogue methods. So we're learning.
We're about to start a 3-month project where the request is help our department to listen. Learn to listen. Help us learn to listen. And there's some very specific methods we're bringing in. We're teaching and practicing this thing called collective story harvest, which is a way for a whole group to listen to the world outside all at once. And there's, I think we're also becoming more of a learning and equipping organization than a straight consulting firm, where we're trying to help groups and organizations own this for themselves rather than have us come in and do it for them.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. I think a lot of people too at consultancies are going through a similar kind of transition. So it's really interesting to hear about how you've been handling it in the direction that you find meaningful. But I think that is the time that we have. But thank you so much, Mark and Hannah, for joining me. It was really interesting.
Thank you, Joe.
Yeah.
Lovely to see you again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And thank you, everyone who's watching this now or in the future. Appreciate you.
Great.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.